In the flickering twilight of a Virginia plantation, two faces met by chance in a silvered mirror of truth, one born to velvet thrones, the other forged in iron chains. But their eyes, those cursed, shifting gray-green orbs, betrayed a divine secret: blood doesn't lie, even when men do. What if one stolen glance from God Himself exposed the rot of sin, unraveling souls in eternal judgment? Tonight, we descend into the abyss where resemblance isn't coincidence, it's retribution. The sun hung low over the James River like a bloodied sacrament, casting long shadows across the tobacco fields of Belle Reve Plantation in Tidewater, Virginia, 1854. The air was thick with the humid breath of the earth, mingled with the acrid scent of curing leaves and the distant, rhythmic chants of field hands, songs not of joy, but of survival, laced with biblical lamentations that echoed the psalms of captivity. Belle Reve stood as a whitewashed temple to human ambition and divine folly, its towering columns rising like the pillars of Solomon's temple, yet built on the sands of iniquity. Here, in this sprawling dominion of 800 acres, Alastair Dandridge reigned as a self-anointed king, his authority as unyielding as the rod of Moses, but wielded not for liberation, but for bondage. Alastair was a man of 47 summers, his frame tall and imposing, like a weathered oak that had withstood storms but bore the scars of excess. His hair, once a rich chestnut, now thinned at the crown, combed with the precision of a Pharisee hiding his flaws. His face was broad and florid, flushed from evenings spent with crystal decanters of whiskey that burned like the fires of Gehenna, and meals heavy with the fruits of others' labors, roast pork glazed in molasses, cornbread steaming with butter, all served on porcelain plates imported from across the seas. But it was his eyes that marked him, those peculiar gray-green orbs that shifted like the moods of a tempestuous god, now stormy slate, now verdant as the forbidden garden. They were a Dandridge heirloom, passed down through generations, staring out from oil portraits that lined the halls like silent judges from the Book of Revelation, their gazes piercing the veil between prosperity and perdition. The main house, erected by Alastair's grandfather in 1798, was a monument to opulence veiled in piety. 16 rooms sprawled within its walls, each adorned with treasures plundered from distant lands. Mahogany furniture from London workshops, velvet drapes from Parisian looms that whispered like serpents in the breeze, crystal chandeliers salvaged from a fallen French chateau, refracting light into rainbows that mocked the covenant after the flood. Silverware gleamed in locked cabinets, enough to ransom a soul, yet it was the true wealth that lay hidden in the shadows, the 63 souls inscribed in a leather-bound ledger, their names etched beside cold valuations, as if they were mere cattle in Pharaoh's herds. This was Alastair's kingdom, where the Bible was quoted at Sunday gatherings to justify the chains, twisting verses of submission into shackles of steel. Evelyn Fairfax Dandridge, his wife of 23 years, moved through this world like a ghost in lace, her once youthful beauty faded into a porcelain fragility. Married at 17 in a ceremony of white blossoms and calculated alliances, she had been a pawn in the game of bloodlines, the Fairfaxes, ancient aristocracy with pedigrees as pure as the driven snow but pockets as empty as Lazarus's tomb, the Dandridges, flush with tobacco gold but hungering for the sanctity of old names. Their union was no romance from the Song of Solomon, but a transaction sealed in orange blossoms and veiled tears. Evelyn's eyes, soft and hazel, held a quiet resignation, a depth of unspoken sorrow that mirrored the Mater Dolorosa, the sorrowful mother bearing the weight of sins not her own. She tended the gardens with gloved hands, pruning roses whose thorns drew blood like stigmata, whispering prayers for deliverance that went unanswered. Their son, Thomas, emerged from this union 11 months after the vows, a child who grew into a man of 22 by that fateful summer. Tall like his father, with the same commanding stature, he carried the Dandridge eyes, those haunting gray-greens that seemed to reflect the soul's hidden turmoils. Yet, from his mother, he inherited a gentleness, a flicker of compassion that flickered like a candle in the wind of brutality. Fresh from the University of Virginia, where he studied law with middling zeal, Thomas wandered the manicured lawns on thoroughbred horses, his silk cravats fluttering like flags of privilege. But beneath the veneer, a spiritual unease gnawed at him, a low hum of guilt that echoed the prophet's cries against injustice. He had witnessed the lashes, heard the cries at auction blocks, seen bodies broken like bread at communion, yet he suppressed it, knowing that to voice such heresy would brand him as a Judas among his kin. In quiet moments, alone in the library with leather-bound tomes of Locke and Jefferson, he pondered the hypocrisy. How could a nation founded on liberty chain its brothers? It was a sin that weighed on him like Cain's mark, invisible yet indelible. Residing in the East Wing was Alastair's sister, Catherine, a spinster of 45 whose tongue was sharper than any serpent's fang. Unmarried, she embroidered pillowcases with intricate patterns, roses entwined with thorns, crosses wreathed in vines, each stitch a silent accusation against a world that had denied her a throne. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, missed nothing. She wielded gossip like the sword of the archangel, slicing through pretenses with remarks that left wounds deeper than whips. Catherine's presence was a constant reminder of unfulfilled promises, her bitterness a poison that seeped into the family's veins, turning meals into trials and conversations into inquisitions. This was the facade of Belle Reve, a family polished like silver, outwardly devout, attending episcopal services where sermons on divine order justified the earthly chains. But beneath it all lurked the shadow of sin, a biblical transgression that whispered of forbidden fruit and cursed lineages. And at its heart was Samuel. Born in the dim confines of the slave quarters on a biting March night in 1832, the very year Thomas drew his first breath in silken cribs, Samuel entered the world amid hushed prayers and muffled cries. His mother, Sarah, was a house servant since her tender years of 13, her life a tapestry of quiet endurance. With skin like polished ebony, eyes deep as midnight wells, and a dignity that defied her bonds, Sarah was among the privileged. Indoor labors spared her the field's merciless sun, her clothes cleaner than the rags of others. Yet privilege was a cruel illusion, for by 20 she had caught Alistair's eye, and in a system where refusal meant death, what was noticed was claimed. No one uttered it aloud, such violations were shadows in the confessional, sins confessed only to God. But the quarters buzzed with whispers when Sarah's form swelled in the summer of 1831, servants exchanging glances like conspirators in the catacombs. Samuel arrived 2 months after Thomas, his cries mingling with the river's murmur. At first, the likeness was subtle, baby's features a blur of innocence. But as years unfolded, the truth emerged like a revelation from the scrolls, the same sharp jaw, the sloping nose, those damning gray-green eyes that shifted like the eyes of God watching from the whirlwind. By 5, Samuel tilted his head and thought just as Thomas did. By adolescence, he mirrored him so profoundly that old Jeremiah, the ancient field hand with 60 years etched in his scars, muttered that Samuel was more Dandridge than the pale cousins from Richmond. Sarah beheld this daily torment, a son she loved with the ferocity of Rachel weeping for her children, yet whose face echoed her violator. It was a crucifixion of the spirit, loving the fruit while despising the seed. She never spoke of his origins, not to Samuel, not to the stars. What good was truth in chains? It could not redeem, it could only condemn. Instead, she instilled in him the gospel of survival: blend into the shadows, child. Let your light be dim, lest it draw the moth of wrath. For to be the living proof of the master's adultery was to court the abyss. Alistair's tolerance hinged on ignorance, a fragile veil that could tear with a glance. By 22, Samuel and Thomas were spectral doubles, half-brothers divided by the chasm of color and caste. Samuel toiled in coarse cotton, hands calloused from dawn's plow to dusk's harvest, his shoulders drawn back in unconscious pride that mirrored Thomas's, yet tempered by fear. Thomas rode silk-clad on steeds, yet both shared the bearing of their sire, a genetic sacrament that mocked the divisions of man. The enslaved community navigated this minefield with the caution of Daniel in the lion's den, knowing, but silent, for acknowledgement invited the floodwaters of retribution. Alistair never claimed Samuel, the fiction preserved the peace, a lie upheld like the golden calf. Thomas had glimpsed the truth at 16, wandering the fields to escape paternal shadows. The sun slanted low, gilding Samuel's face as he labored, and for a heartbeat, Thomas stared into a distorted mirror, his own features in darker hue, clad in rags. Shock rooted him, implications swirled like tempests: rape, bastardy, the enslavement of kin. Samuel's eyes dropped, body tensing like a lamb before slaughter, and that fear pierced Thomas deeper than any blade. He never confronted Alistair, the words too blasphemous, the revelation too shattering. To admit it was to see his father not as patriarch, but as the serpent in Eden. So he averted his gaze, treating Samuel as phantom, a non-entity in the grand theater of denial. Into this tinderbox of suppressed sins rolled Silas Croft in July 1854, his wagon a nomadic ark laden with alchemical wonders. At 36, from Baltimore's bustling streets, Silas was a wanderer with sandy hair thinning like autumn leaves, wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a nose scarred by chemical fumes. His vehicle reeked of silver nitrate's bite, bromine's sting, mercury's poisonous haze, a laboratory on wheels where images were birthed from darkness. Trained in daguerreotype since 1850, he traversed the South, capturing the elite's vanities for coin. Photography, a nascent miracle barely 15 years old, was the province of the affluent. Daguerreotypes, images etched on silvered copper, demanded patience, precision, peril. Plates sensitized in iodine vapors, exposed for minutes in unwieldy cameras, developed in heated mercury that could steal breath like a demon's whisper. Silas had immortalized patriarchs rigid as statues, matrons in silks like queens of Sheba, children posed in faux innocence. He framed mansions, gardens, fields, and, at owner's behest, the enslaved, reducing lives to property inventories, a visual ledger of souls bartered like Judas's silver. These sessions haunted Silas, complicity weighing like millstones, but survival demanded silence. Summoned by Alistair after impressing neighbors, Silas rattled up the Oakline Drive on a Thursday, his mission, a family portrait and architectural paeans to Belle Reve's glory. Setup consumed hours, the camera a behemoth on tripod, chemicals mixed with ritual care. The formal shot loomed for Saturday, but Friday's tests birthed the cataclysm. Aiming at the facade's gleaming columns to gauge light, Silas uncapped the lens as figures traversed the frame. Plantations pulsed with life, he waited, but impatience won. Exposure began, and fate intervened. Thomas sauntered from the house, linen shirt billowing, confidence etched in every stride. Samuel approached from outbuildings, basket heavy with kindling, steps measured to invisibility. They crossed 15 feet apart, profiles aligned for 20 seconds, enough for blur, but not erasure. Silas dismissed it, a flawed test for chemicals and timing, destined for discard. That eve, in lantern-lit wagon, he developed the plate. As vapors cleared, revelation dawned, 2 profiles, motion-softened yet unmistakable, identical jaws, noses, eyes, bearings. One in finery, one in rags, one free, one bound, but kin, blood's undeniable testament. Silas's hands shook like Peter's denial. For years in the South had schooled him in hypocrisies, the night visits, the mulatto children whispered of in taverns. But here was proof, etched in silver, a divine indictment like the handwriting on Belshazzar's wall. Danger loomed, this image could ignite scandals, doom Samuel and era, shatter Dandridge prestige. Instinct screamed destruction, shatter the plate, melt it to oblivion. Yet Silas hesitated. A seed of rebellion, nurtured by witnessed atrocities, whippings like Christ's scourging, families sundered like the temple veil, stirred. He wrapped it in cloth, secreted it away, rationalizing delay. Deep down, he craved preservation, evidence against the edifice of lies, a spark for Judgment Day. Dawn brought the commissioned portrait. The Dandridges arrayed on the portico, Alistair central, stern as a judge, Evelyn beside, grey silk pooling like tears, Thomas behind, suited in splendor, Catherine aside, face etched in disdain. 12 minutes of immobility in July's furnace, sweat beating like penance, Evelyn's twitch a silent plea, Catherine's glare sharpening to fury. Developed, it was impeccable, harmony incarnate, sins concealed. Alistair, elated, ordered duplicates and more shots, house angles for kin in Richmond, proofs of unchallenged dominion. But the hidden plate pulsed like a guilty heart, a harbinger of reckoning. In the spiritual undercurrents of Belle Reve, where prayers ascended from quarters like incense from altars, the photograph was no accident. It was Providence, a mirror reflecting the soul's stains, foretelling a fall like Babel's tower. The lies, so meticulously woven, began to fray, divine justice, patient as the grave, stirred in the shadows. As days unfolded, Silas navigated commissions with feigned calm, but the plate's weight grew. He captured the garden's roses blooming blood-red, thorns guarding secrets, the riverbank where baptisms mocked the enslaved's unwashed sins, the fields where laborers bent like penitents, their songs invocations for exodus. Each click echoed judgment, but none rivaled the accidental revelation. Meanwhile, Samuel toiled unaware, his spirit resilient yet scarred. Mornings began with era's whispered blessings, verses from Exodus, promises of a Moses yet to come. He dreamed of freedom not in chains broken, but souls redeemed, his resemblance a curse or perhaps a key to unlock paternal conscience. Thomas, conversely, wrestled inner demons, nights haunted by mirrored faces, guilt coiling like the serpent. He attended balls in neighboring estates, courting belles with fortunes, but his heart echoed hollow, the unspoken brotherhood a thorn in his side. Catherine, ever vigilant, sensed discord. Her embroidery sessions became vigils, eyes darting like ravens. She noted Alistair's averted gazes toward the quarters, Evelyn's pallor, Thomas's distractions. Gossip from servants, veiled in code, fueled her arsenal, ready for deployment like arrows from David's sling. Alistair, oblivious to the brewing storm, reveled in photographic triumphs. He displayed the family portrait in the parlor, a shrine to legacy, ignoring the spiritual rot beneath. But God, in his infinite irony, had captured the truth through a stranger's lens, a testament that blood, like sin, demands acknowledgement. The plate remained hidden, but its aura permeated. Silas pondered its fate: destroy or disseminate? Morality warred with fear, complicity in silence, or catalyst for change? In quiet prayers, he sought guidance, the image. A talisman against apathy. Thus, the stage was set for unraveling. Belle Reve, facade of piety, harbored the original sin of a nation's slavery's hypocrisy, paternal betrayal, spiritual blindness. The photograph was the finger of God, pointing to the heart's darkness, promising exposure, retribution, perhaps redemption. In this cinematic tableau of antebellum dread, where sensory details painted the scene, the rustle of cotton fields like whispering ghosts, the metallic tang of river mist, the oppressive heat mirroring hellfire, the story deepened into a parable of divine justice, where one image could fell empires built on sand. The twilight descended upon Belle Reve like a shroud woven from the threads of unspoken sins, the James River murmuring psalms of judgment as it lapped against the banks stained with the sweat of the oppressed. In the summer of 1854, the air hung heavy with the scent of blooming night jasmine, mingling with the earthy tang of turned soil and the faint, metallic bite of tobacco leaves drying in the barns, aromas that masked the deeper rot of moral decay. Silas Croft, the itinerant photographer, lingered in this den of veiled hypocrisies for 4 more days, his wagon parked under the ancient oaks whose gnarled branches reached skyward like accusing fingers toward a heedless god. Treated as a guest rather than a tradesman, he was granted a chamber in the main house, its 4-poster bed draped in mosquito netting that fluttered like ghostly veils, and dined at the grand mahogany table where crystal goblets clinked like false toasts to prosperity built on broken backs. Alistair Dandridge, ever the magnanimous patriarch, commissioned additional daguerreotypes, one solitary portrait of himself for the study, where leather-bound ledgers of human inventory lined the shelves like forbidden tomes, another of Thomas for Evelyn's parlor, a sanctum of faded lace doilies and porcelain figurines that evoked fragile Madonnas, and a sweeping landscape from the estate's highest knoll, capturing the vast tobacco fields undulating like a sea of green damnation under the relentless sun. Silas worked meticulously, his hands stained with the alchemical residues of silver nitrate and mercury vapors that burned like the fires of purgatory, each exposure a ritual of stillness in a world teeming with unrest. The family obliged, posing with the rigidity of saints and icons, their expressions masks of composure hiding the turmoil of souls entangled in the web of original sin. Yet, throughout these days, the hidden daguerreotype pulsed in Silas's equipment chest like a beating heart concealed in Poe's telltale floorboards, a silvered indictment of paternal transgression, its existence a spiritual weight that bent his conscience like a reed in the storm. He caught glimpses of Samuel in the periphery, the young man gliding through the shadows of the dependencies, his movements deliberate and unobtrusive, like a specter haunting the edges of Eden. Samuel's coarse cotton shirt clung to his frame, damp with the day's labors, his hands calloused from wielding hoes that furrowed the earth as if tilling the ground for divine harvest. He avoided the white family's gaze with the instinct of one versed in the gospel of survival, his gray-green eyes, those inherited emblems of Dandridge lineage, downcast, reflecting not pride but the quiet endurance of Job amidst trials. On Silas's final eve at Belle Reve, as the sun bled crimson across the horizon, casting elongated shadows that danced like demons on the lawn, he witnessed a tableau that seared into his memory like a biblical vision. Packing his apparatus under the dimming sky, where fireflies began their ethereal ballet like wandering souls, Silas glanced upward to the second-floor balcony. There stood Thomas, silhouetted against the fiery dusk, his fine linen shirt billowing gently, hands resting on the wrought iron railing forged in the fires of southern industry. His posture spoke of inherited dominion, yet his eyes fixed on the distant fields with a gaze heavy as Cain's after the fratricide. Below, in the waning light, Samuel toiled late, his form bent over the soil, muscles rippling under skin darkened by sun and heritage, gathering the last sheaves as if preparing for a famine foretold. From Silas's vantage, their profiles aligned in eerie symmetry, one elevated in privilege, the other grounded in subjugation, mirrors of each other against the apocalyptic sunset. The resemblance was profane, a mockery of God's design, where blood unified what society severed. Thomas must have perceived it too. Silas saw his knuckles blanch against the rail, veins protruding like roots of a poison tree, his body tensing as if struck by an invisible lash from the heavens. A moment of frozen eternity passed, the air thick with unspoken fraternity, before Thomas whirled away, vanishing into the house's maw like Jonah fleeing Nineveh. Silas shuddered, the scene a divine omen, packing his secrets and departing at dawn with gold in his pouch and guilt in his soul. He vowed, as his wagon rattled northward through Virginia's winding roads flanked by dogwood blooms and whispering pines, to shatter the compromising plate upon reaching the next haven. The journey to Petersburg spanned 3 days, punctuated by fleeting commissions, a stiff portrait of a merchant clan in a forgotten hamlet, their faces etched with the mundane greed of mammon, and a post-mortem daguerreotype of an infant, swaddled in lace for eternity, a heartbreaking memento in an age where death stalked cradles like the angel of Exodus, claiming the firstborns of the unwary. These tasks grounded Silas in his craft, yet the hidden image haunted him, a spiritual specter whispering of complicity in the grand iniquity. Petersburg bustled with the clamor of commerce, horse-drawn carts clattering over cobblestones, vendors hawking wares under gas lamps that flickered like false beacons, and here Silas saw Douglas Webb, a printer whose workshop reeked of ink and solvents, shelves groaning under reams of paper destined for replication. Webb mastered the art of duplicating daguerreotypes onto paper, a boon for scattering likenesses like seeds of vanity across kin networks. Silas delivered the sanction plates, the family tableau of feigned unity, the landscapes glorifying bondage, and requested multiples for Alistair's dispersal. Fate, or perhaps Providence's inexorable hand, intervened in the dimly lit workshop, where lanterns cast dancing shadows on walls adorned with sample prints. As Silas unwrapped his cargo, the concealed test plate slipped, tumbling to the scarred wooden floor with a clatter like dropped communion wafers. The cloth parted, revealing a sliver of the damning image. Webb, ever obliging, stooped to retrieve it before Silas could lunge. "Careful," Silas barked, voice edged with panic, "that's not but a botched test, blurred, worthless. I'll melt it down." But Webb's curiosity, honed by years peering into captured souls, prevailed. He unfurled the cloth fully, holding the plate to the light. His breath caught, eyes widening as if beholding the burning bush. "Lord have mercy," he murmured, tracing the profiles with a trembling finger. This is no accident." Silas snatched for it, protesting, "It's nothing, shadows and coincidence." Yet Webb's gaze pierced like an inquisitor's, these men, twins from different realms. "Thomas Dandridge, isn't it? And the other? God, the implication." Silas faltered, the workshop's air thickening with the scent of revelation. "I know what it suggests. That's why it ends here." Webb rewrapped it slowly, but his words hung like a noose. "My brother Marcus, he's an abolitionist in Philadelphia. Publishes a firebrand sheet. An image like this? It could be manna from heaven for the cause, exposing the serpent in the garden, masters siring slaves they chain." Dread coiled in Silas's gut like the tempter's whisper. "No. I'm no crusader, this would ruin me, banish me from southern hearths. And the boy, his mother, they'd pay with blood. Dandridge's wrath knows no mercy." Webb conceded with a nod, the transaction resuming in strained hush. Copies emerged pristine, payment exchanged, and Silas departed, convinced the abyss had closed. He aired gravely. Douglas Webb, a man of mild temperament, Sundays in pews reciting creeds of forgiveness, weekdays inking banal broadsheets, harbored no zealot's fire. Yet familial bonds tugged like Jacob's ladder. His brother Marcus, 8 years exiled to Philadelphia's fervent abolitionist enclaves, had traded seminary robes for the mantle of prophet, decrying slavery's abomination in the Liberty Standard, a monthly clarion summoning the faithful to dismantle Pharaoh's pyramids. Douglas's letter, penned 3 days post-Silas, masqueraded as fraternal chatter, descriptions of the plate's uncanny kinship, the Dandridge's vaunted stature, the societal veneer cracking under visual truth. Just an oddity, he claimed, but the seed was sown. Marcus, receiving it in August swelter, descended upon Petersburg veiled as kin visitor. His persuasion was a torrent biblical rhetoric framing the image as evidentiary thunderbolt against systemic evil. "This is the handwriting on the wall, brother. A father begets, then binds his begotten, denying the imago Dei in his own flesh. Society averts its eyes, but this forces sight." Douglas wavered, invoking perils to innocence. Marcus countered callously, "Their chains are peril incarnate, what greater hell? This sparks exodus." Yielding, Douglas birthed one illicit copy, rationalizing it as reluctant alms to the cause. Marcus spirited it northward, unveiling it in abolitionist dens where lamplight illuminated faces fervent as apostles. October 1854 saw the Liberty Standards blaze, the Sons of the South, a daguerreotype unveils slavery's concealed atrocity. The page bore the reproduced image, faint yet faithful, profiles proclaiming fraternity and a scorching narrative, Belle Reve's opulence as Sodom's twin, Alastair as hypocritical Herod, the system a moral sepulchre whitewashed over graves. Circulation numbered 800, seeds scattered among northern choirs preaching to the converted, New York parlors, Massachusetts meetinghouses, yet whispers amplified, excerpts reprinted, copies migrating southward like avenging angels. By November, Richmond's elite murmured, December saw Norfolk's recognition of the Dandridge crest. January 1855 birthed open scandal in Tidewater salons, where teacups clinked over veiled accusations, society dissecting the family like a sacrificial lamb. Catherine Dandridge, the spinster sentinel, first bore the tidings home from a church social, where stained-glass saints gazed disapprovingly. Beatrice Caldwell, a cousin with venom-sweet lips, cornered her, darling Catherine. Whispers abound about Alastair, some northern rag flaunts a photograph, dubbing it proof of indiscretions. A slave mirroring Thomas, they claim. Catherine's world spun, the room's floral wallpaper blurring like a fever dream. She had discerned Samuel's echo years prior, the Dandridge eyes staring from darker visage, but acknowledgement was heresy. Lies. Abolitionist venom to tarnish our sanctity. Beatrice's smile sliced, naturally, but scandal clings like burrs, tarnishing alliances, prospects. Fleeing under migraine's guise, Catherine stormed Belle Reve, confronting Alastair in his study amid cigar haze and ledger ghosts. We must speak of your bastard, she hissed, door slamming like judgment's gavel. The clash erupted volcanic, Alastair's denials crumbled under Catherine's barrage. I've seen him, our eyes, our blood. You violated her, sired in sin, enslaved your seed. Disgrace upon our lineage. Alastair flushed crimson as Judas's kiss, mind your words, this roof is mine. Yet Catherine pressed, our forebears' legacy soiled. Thomas's betrothal? No virgin bride for a house of shame. The barb struck, Alastair envisioned unions fraying, influence waning. Catherine's decree, sell him south, Georgia's depths, Alabama's oblivion. Banish the mother too. Erase the evidence. Practical as Pilate's wash, yet Alastair harbored a secret vow, whispered to Ara in guilt's nadir, cradling infant Samuel, I'll not sell you or him. A fleeting grace, now a shackle. I'll ponder, he muttered. Catherine's parting shot, still shielding your harlot? After this infamy? Her exit rattled ancestral portraits, their eyes accusing. Evelyn, absent yet omniscient through servant whispers, house slaves as unseen seraphim, absorbing dialogues like sponges, learned all. The quarters buzzed with trepidation, Ara clutching Samuel in prayer vigils, invoking psalms for deliverance. Thomas, sensing the storm, retreated to books, wrestling demons of kinship denied. Alastair brooded, whiskey burning like hellfire, contemplating betrayal of his oath. The photograph, once accidental, now prophetic, a divine scalpel excising hypocrisy's tumor. Belle Reve teetered on revelation's brink, sins surfacing like leviathans from depths, promising cataclysm in the name of justice long deferred. In this tapestry of sensory immersion, the creak of floorboards under furtive steps, the acrid smoke of hearths mirroring smoldering resentments, the chill of winter winds foretelling doom, the narrative deepened into a spiritual odyssey, where redemption flickered dimly amid retribution's blaze. Winter gripped Tidewater, Virginia in February 1855 like the cold hand of judgment, the James River frozen at its edges, brittle reeds cracking underfoot, the tobacco fields lying fallow and desolate under a leaden sky that promised no mercy. Belle Reve's white columns, once gleaming in summer's glory, now stood stark against gray horizons, their paint peeling like flaking skin on a leper, revealing the decay beneath the facade of grandeur. Inside the main house, fires roared in every hearth, yet warmth eluded the souls within. Only the chill of revelation permeated the air, thick with the scent of wood smoke, beeswax candles, and the faint, acrid bitterness of unspoken accusations. Evelyn Dandridge, at 52, moved through her domain with the precision of a woman who had long ago learned to armor her heart in layers of propriety. Her days were rituals of control, overseeing the household slaves as they polished silver until it reflected distorted truths, arranging cut flowers whose thorns drew pinpricks of blood like small atonements, hosting teas where laughter rang hollow as cathedral bells tolling for the damned. For 23 years she had upheld the covenant of Southern womanhood, managing the estate, nurturing Thomas into manhood, presenting to society a portrait of marital harmony painted over cracks of infidelity. She had mastered the art of selective blindness, glimpsing Samuel in the fields, noting the unmistakable Dandridge eyes that mirrored Thomas's, yet averting her gaze as one might from a beggar's sores, refusing to acknowledge the living proof of Alastair's violation. The house servants, invisible witnesses to every tremor in the great house, carried the confrontation between Catherine and Alastair like sacred scrolls through the corridors. By morning's pale light, Evelyn knew the photograph existed, a silvered testament circulating among abolitionist presses in Southern drawing rooms, exposing what she had buried in the sepulchre of her silence. Visual proof defied denial. It was no longer a whispered suspicion to be dismissed with a fan's flutter, but an indelible image that strangers dissected, pitying her humiliation, mocking her endurance. The knowledge burned like slow poison, corroding the plausible deniability she had cultivated like a prized rose. She had not confronted Alastair in over 15 years, not since the early days when tears and pleas yielded only scorn and accusations of hysteria. Southern code granted him dominion over enslaved bodies. It demanded she preserve decorum, swallow betrayal like bitter communion wine. But publicity altered the sacrament. When scandal threatened Thomas, the legitimate heir, the vessel of future alliances, she sought Alastair in his study 2 days after Catherine's storm. The room was a sanctum of masculine authority, mahogany desk scarred by quill scratches, ledgers recording human chattel beside volumes of scripture twisted to justify bondage, a portrait of Alastair's father glaring down with those same grey-green eyes. Alastair hunched over papers, weary shadows pooling beneath his florid face. "We must discuss our son's future," Evelyn announced, voice steady as a judge pronouncing sentence, though fury simmered beneath like coals banked for explosion. Alastair glanced up, exhaustion etching deeper lines. "What of it?" "The Birminghams have withdrawn their daughter. No engagement. No alliance." Color fled his cheeks like blood from a wound. The Birmingham's Richmond royalty, political leverage incarnate, had been months in negotiation, the announcement slated for March's grand ball. "Why?" he rasped, though the answer coiled in his gut. "Concerns over family reputation," Evelyn replied icily. "They need not elaborate, the implication poisons the air. This scandal will taint Thomas. Eternally, his prospects, his standing, all sacrificed on the altar of your appetites. You forced yourself upon her, fathered a child in sin, then kept him here as living testimony." "Evelyn, for 23 years I have upheld this house," she continued, voice cracking like thin ice. "Managed your domain, raised your acknowledged son, entertained your circle, worn the mask of perfection. In return? Daily humiliation. The evidence walks our grounds, 22 years old, bearing your face. And now a photograph broadcasts it to the world, abolitionists gloating, society whispering. How do I pretend when strangers see what I have forced myself to ignore?" Alastair rose, frustration boiling. "What would you have me do? Undo the past? Confront the present," she snapped. "Catherine speaks truth. Sell them both. Southward, to Georgia or Alabama, where no eyes connect them to us. Sever the link, let oblivion swallow the shame." "I cannot," he whispered. Evelyn's stare pierced like lances. "Cannot?" "I promised her. I would not sell them." The silence stretched, terrible as the void between heaven and hell. Evelyn's face contorted disbelief, rage, a flicker of profound, wounded betrayal, before freezing into contempt colder than winter's breath. "You promised her," she echoed, voice trembling. "To the woman you violated, you kept your word. Yet every vow to me, fidelity, honor, protection, you shattered like glass underfoot. It's not." "Leave my sight," she commanded. "I cannot bear your presence." Alastair fled his own study, the door closing softly behind him like a tomb ceiling. Thomas received the tidings mid-January via a discreet letter from a Richmond confidant, enclosing a clipped excerpt from the Liberty Standard, no image, yet words sharp as thorns: legitimate heir and enslaved brother, captured in silver, unveiling plantation hypocrisy. Alone in his chamber, lamplight flickering across walls lined with law tomes and family portraits, Thomas's hands shook. Private knowledge had been bearable, public exposure was crucifixion. The denial he had nurtured crumbled like dry clay. The letter urged escape, Europe, the North, until scandal faded. Flee, abandon kin to the storm. Thomas recoiled. Whatever Alastair's sins, desertion was cowardice. Yet normalcy at Belle Reve was impossible, the truth now a suffocating pall. That night, under a moon veiled in clouds, Thomas ventured to the slave quarters, a forbidden realm of rough-hewn cabins in parallel rows, smoke curling from chimneys like prayers ascending unanswered. He had never trod here save in childhood curiosity. Heart-hammering, he approached Era's cabin, better appointed with glass panes and a solid door, small mercies for house servants. He knocked softly. Era opened, 43 yet radiant in resilience, beauty undimmed by toil. Seeing him, her face blanked into guarded neutrality. "Master Thomas," she murmured. "Trouble?" Fear radiated from her. White men at night meant violation or punishment. "I need Samuel," he said. "To speak." "He's done nothing," she defended instantly. "I know. Just talk." Era hesitated, then yielded. The cabin was sparse, hearth glowing ember red, narrow beds, rough table. Samuel mended a shirt by candlelight, rising. His resemblance struck Thomas like a blow. Same profile, same eyes, candle flames dancing in identical gray-green depths. "Leave us," Thomas told Era. "No," she declared. "If you speak to my son, I stay." Her defiance stunned him. He nodded mutely. Silence thickened. Samuel broke it. "We heard of the photograph." Thomas winced. "News reaches even here." "Always has," Samuel replied evenly. "I'm sorry," Thomas offered. "For the danger, not your fault." "Danger is constant," Samuel said. "It's what property endures." "You're my brother," Thomas blurted. "Half-brother. We both know." "Does your father?" Samuel asked. Era interjected, voice steel. "He knows. Knew for 22 years. Chose to watch one son in chains, the other in silk. Not ignorance, deliberate sin." Thomas bowed his head. "I know. And I don't know how to mend it." "You can't," Samuel stated plainly. "Some wounds scar eternal." Thomas revealed the sale threat. Terror flashed across their faces. Sail south meant exile, harsher labors, family rent asunder like the temple veil. "Can you halt it?" Era pleaded. "I lack power," Thomas admitted. "But I'm his legitimate son. It must count." They conversed near an hour, Thomas learning of Samuel's existence, daily subservience performances, cruelties casual as breathing, fear woven into every dawn. Shame flooded him like baptismal waters too late. Departing, no fixes offered, yet a bridge formed, a brother seen, humanized. Conviction grew. Belle Reve's order was abomination, irredeemable without radical rupture. February brought Beatrice Caldwell unannounced, carriage crunching gravel like bones underfoot. Wealthy widow, Norfolk's gossip sovereign, she wielded secrets as weapons. Evelyn received her in the parlor, velvet drapes drawn against prying eyes, tea service gleaming mockingly. Unexpected pleasure, Evelyn lied. "Darling, I've heard such distressing tales," Beatrice purred, claiming the prime seat. Norfolk buzzes unabated. Copies of that rag circulate, the photograph fascinates. Invitations rescind, partnerships dissolve. Your name, scandal synonym. Gossip fades, Evelyn countered. Does it? The Birminghams withdrew, true? Private. So true. And Thomas, visiting quarters at night? Improper whispers abound. Panic iced Evelyn's veins, further fuel for fire. Leave, she said. Not yet, Beatrice smiled razor-sharp. My March team, Norfolk's elite. I insist the Dandridges attend. A gauntlet thrown, accept, risk humiliation, refuse, confess guilt. We'd be delighted, Evelyn replied, voice brittle as frost. Beatrice departed, invitation forthcoming like a summons to trial. Belle Reve trembled on the precipice, sins surfacing, alliances fracturing, divine justice inexorable. In sensory immersion, the crackle of hearth fires mirroring burning reputations, the scent of wax and wilting roses, the chill wind rattling windows like accusing fingers, the story deepened into spiritual reckoning, where one photograph compelled confession, confrontation, and perhaps, at great cost, the faint dawn of redemption. The Norfolk estate of Beatrice Caldwell shimmered under the pale March sun of 1855, its manicured gardens budding with early azaleas whose pink blossoms mocked the winter still clinging to hearts. Carriages lined the drive like supplicants at a tribunal, their polished brass gleaming coldly. Inside the grand parlor, chandeliers dripped crystal tears of light onto damask-covered walls, the air scented with bergamot tea, lemon cakes, and the subtle venom of refined cruelty. 30 women of Tidewater's elite had gathered, ostensibly for genteel discourse, yet the undercurrent was predatory, a circle of vultures disguised in silk and lace. The Dandridges arrived as a phalanx of forced unity, Alastair in charcoal broadcloth, jaw set like granite, Evelyn in dove-grey silk, posture rigid as a marble Madonna, Catherine's eyes sharp as daggers beneath her bonnet, Thomas pale, his fine suit hanging loose on a frame thinned by sleepless nights. Beatrice greeted them with effusive falsity, arms wide as if embracing prodigals. The Dandridges! How marvelous! Do come in, everyone is simply dying to see how dear Thomas fares amid such tribulations. The tea unfolded with ritual precision, silver spoons stirring porcelain cups, delicate bites of sponge cake crumbling like fragile alliances. Yet conversation twisted into barbs veiled as concern. "How are you bearing up, Evelyn darling?" one matron inquired, voice dripping honeyed sympathy. "Such dreadful rumors must weigh heavily." Another turned to Thomas with arched brow. "We've heard you've developed quite the interest in your family's laborers." "How very enlightened." Each query landed like a lash, polite yet lacerating, southern passive aggression honed to surgical sharpness. Then Beatrice struck the mortal blow. "I have something that might intrigue you all," she announced during a lull, producing the Liberty Standard from a side table. The newspaper unfolded with theatrical slowness, the reproduced daguerreotype staring out two profiles in silver, undeniable kinship etched in light and shadow. She read aloud, voice modulated for maximum torment, excerpts detailing Alastair's violation of Era, the birth of Samuel, the moral rot of a system that enslaved its own blood. Of course, Beatrice concluded, eyes wide with feigned innocence, abolitionist fabrications, no doubt. But the resemblance, quite extraordinary, wouldn't you agree? The paper circulated hand to hand. Gasps, murmurs, barely concealed smirks, shock mingling with schadenfreude as the fallen were savored. Evelyn sat petrified, teacup frozen midair, porcelain trembling in her grasp. Thomas blanched, fists clenched white-knuckled. Catherine's face contorted into murderous fury. Thomas rose abruptly. "We're leaving." "But you've scarcely touched your tea," Beatrice protested sweetly. "Now," Thomas repeated, voice steel-wrapped in rage. The family departed in silence, humiliation a palpable shroud. The carriage ride home stretched eternal, wheels grinding gravel like grinding teeth. After an hour of suffocating quiet, Evelyn spoke, tone eerily composed. "This cannot persist." "What do you suggest?" Alastair asked, exhaustion weighting every syllable. "I depart for Charleston with Catherine. To my sister's home. I will not remain here, breathing the air poisoned by your sins. I take no counsel, I inform you. Keep your plantation, your promises, your bastard. I am gone." "Mother," Thomas began. "You must choose," Evelyn cut in, gaze piercing. "Accompany us, distance yourself from this mire, or remain in sync with him. Loyalty has a price." Thomas glanced between parents, father's defeated slump, mother's icy resolve. "I cannot abandon." "Abandon whom?" Evelyn's contempt sliced. "Your father, after his depravities? Or the brother you've suddenly discovered in the quarters?" "I don't know," he whispered. "Then decide by dawn." That night, Thomas entered the study where Alastair sat in darkness, whiskey decanter half empty, fire dying to embers. The room smelled of aged leather, smoke, and despair. "I'm staying," Thomas declared from the threshold. Alastair looked up, surprise flickering. "Your mother flees truth. You embrace it? Running solves nothing. It doesn't erase Samuel as my brother. You've built on denial, see where it led. You're sacrificing prospects, alliances, everything. Perhaps. But I won't construct my life on erasure. That's your legacy. Look at its fruit. Alistair flinched. What do you demand? Contrition? Would words mend this? No. Manumission. Papers for Era and Samuel. Funds for a new start. Let them go truly free. Free them amid scandal? It confesses guilt. You are guilty, Thomas stated flatly. All know it. The question, will you atone? And if I refuse? Then I wait. I inherit. Belle Reve becomes mine, and my first act frees every soul you've bound. Wage them if they stay, equip them if they leave. Your choice ends with me. Alistair met his son's gaze, the same grey-green eyes, now burning with righteous fire, the Dandridge stubbornness turned inward against itself. You've grown self-righteous. I've grown honest. Lies feel radical only after long immersion in them. 3 days later, March's chill still biting, Alistair signed manumission papers in the study, quill scratching like a final confession. Virginia law demanded freed blacks depart within a year or face re-enslavement, a hollow liberty hedged with chains, but it was liberty nonetheless. He added $200 in gold coin, sufficient for northward passage and modest beginnings. Thomas carried the documents to the quarters at dusk. Era opened the cabin door, candlelight haloing her face. She read, tears tracing silent paths down cheeks weathered by decades of endurance. Free, she breathed, the word foreign yet holy. Philadelphia, she decided. Cousins there escaped years ago. They'll shelter us. I'm sorry, Thomas said, voice thick. For every year stolen by my father. For silence. For complicity. Era studied him long. You are not him. Hold that truth. Samuel emerged, papers in hand, trembling. Thomas extended his brother to brother. After a heartbeat, Samuel clasped it firmly. Thank you, Samuel murmured. Don't thank me. This is justice's minimum owed long ago. They departed at first light 2 days hence, bags modest, papers precious as scripture. Thomas watched from the balcony as their figures diminished down the oak-lined drive, two souls walking into uncertain dawn, chains shattered at last. Evelyn and Catherine removed to Charleston, never to return. Evelyn lived until 1867, maintaining victimhood's narrative, refusing Alistair any word. Catherine's bitterness hardened into lifelong exile. Alistair lingered at Belle Reve, a ghost in his own kingdom. Friends vanished, invitations ceased, political doors slammed. He died in 1859, wealthy in ledgers, destitute in fellowship, reputation forever scarred by the silvered truth. Thomas inherited, honoring his vow. He manumitted gradually, avoiding ruin, offering wages, aid for departure. By 1863, when Lincoln's proclamation rang, Belle Reve ran on paid labor, a fragile redemption amid national upheaval. He never wed, devoting years to amends, though self-forgiveness eluded him for the decades of averted eyes. Era and Samuel reached Philadelphia in April 1855, joining the vibrant free black community. Samuel mastered carpentry, opened a modest shop, married, fathered children, witnessing slavery's end. Era lived to 73, sharing Belle Reve fragments sparingly, pain too raw for prolonged gaze. Silas Croft, learning the upheaval his accident birthed, destroyed the original plate in anguished guilt. Yet copies endured, circulating in abolitionist tracts, later historical archives, labeled simply Two Sons of the South. That image transcends one family's fall. It exposes slavery's core. Deception, racial division as divine ordinance, when blood mocked the lie. Resemblances like Thomas and Samuel's proliferated unseen across the South, fruits of violation, hidden in plain sight. What set this apart was permanence, silver capturing what words could deny, forcing confrontation with engineered blindness. One photograph dismantled pretense. It compelled sight where training forbade it. Once seen, truth persists unburied, resonant across centuries. It reminds that some revelations, once etched in light, demand justice, however belated, however incomplete. In Belle Reve's ruins, divine retribution and fragile mercy intertwined, a testament that sin's mirror, once held up, shatters empires of denial forever.